Fatema Begun has lost one of her children. Her youngest son only reached the age of 32.
My little brother was my closest companion. Now I'll never see him again.
Sujan died far away from his homeland Bangladesh as a migrant worker in Qatar. Taslima Akhtar has to take care of her mother. These days, the 65-year-old is weaker than usual. It's the anniversary of the death of Sujan, her youngest. He died exactly 2 years ago today. She used to talk on the phone with her younger brother every day, says Taslima. Sujan would often complain about the conditions in Qatar, the heat, the grueling work, that he wasn't receiving the agreed wage, that he often had to wait months to be paid.
My brother was still so young. He went away to earn money, to give us a better life. We never dreamed he'd die so suddenly. It breaks my heart that he's not here anymore. He worked in Qatar for 3 years, and our debts are bigger than before.
A job in Qatar, the nation hosting the upcoming Soccer World Cup, an enticing prospect for millions of migrant workers from the global south. Because they're struggling to make ends meet at home, they're trying their luck in the tiny Persian Gulf Emirate. Qatar is one of the world's richest nations due to its immense reserves of oil and gas. The emirate is home to almost 3 million people, but only a small proportion of these are Qatari citizens. More than 2 million residents are migrant workers. The nation's wealth isn't shared with them. They're usually paid the minimum wage of around 270 euros a month. Some 4,000 kilometers to the east, Jamal Mullah, the dead migrant worker's older brother, heads to his little shop. There's not much work here in Chagaiya, a village near the capital Dhaka. The shop is just enough for Jamal to keep himself afloat.
To be able to send my brother abroad, we had to take out a loan and also borrow money from our relatives. And now we've no idea how we're ever going to repay it all.
Workers are usually recruited through agencies in their home nations. Agency fees can often run into several thousand euros, and many take on debts to pay them. At the contract signing, agents promise a good wage and decent accommodation, but on arrival in Qatar, workers are frequently greeted with a very different reality. To this day, Jamal Mullah and his family don't know why Sujan suddenly died 2 years ago. One thing's beyond doubt: his wasn't an isolated case. Thousands of mostly young men have left for Qatar and not returned alive.
It happened in the early hours of the 23rd of September, 2020. One evening, my cousin rang and gave us the news of Sujan's death. How did he die? We were told his teeth suddenly started hurting, and that he'd later died in hospital of a heart attack.
On Sujan's death certificate, it says, acute heart failure due to natural causes, wording commonly used to cover up other potential causes of migrant workers' deaths, such as total exhaustion or heat stroke, says Amnesty International. We try and contact the company named on the death certificate, but it's not that simple. An internet search for Khan Kubra trading and contracting draws a complete blank. We call the Qatari number on the death certificate. A man with an Indian accent picks up. He confirms that he works for Khan Kubra, but when we ask for a name and an email address, the man just hangs up. Trade union official Dietmar Schäfers isn't at all surprised.
What we're experiencing in Qatar is not unusual for the entire Gulf region. Specifically, people are working with several subcontractors, which makes it all the more difficult to follow the chain, often with dubious companies in the mix.
The German official has been travelling regularly to Qatar for the past 9 years to assess working conditions in the emirate. Huge international pressure has resulted in genuine improvements on official FIFA building sites, says Schäfers. Nevertheless, more needs to be done to address some of the less visible deficits, he adds.
Qatar has initiated reforms, and now it simply needs to enforce them more stringently. For example, with a great many more inspectors and much more severe penalties for non-compliance with the new laws.
Officially, during the hottest summer months, no one is allowed to work outside in the middle of the day. But where there's no plaintiff, there's no judge. The violations are possible because most migrants find themselves at the mercy of their employers, owing to a perfidious sponsorship system known as kafala. And this is how it works. To be allowed to enter Qatar, foreign workers need a local sponsor. Usually that's the employer. As a sponsor, the employer determines the right of every migrant to live and work in the country. Often employers even confiscate their workers' passports. If a worker wants to change his job or leave the country, he needs his sponsor's permission to do that. A form of modern slavery, say human rights organizations.
Officially, the Qatari government has abolished the system, but it's not being effectively monitored. And we're still seeing many cases where passports are being retained and employees can't leave the country when they want.
The emirate even admits to its partners abroad that there are deficits. At a meeting in Germany, Qatar's ambassador addresses the German Football Association.
We are not claiming we are perfect, but it's a journey that we will ride. Don't expect Qatar in 5 or 6 years, just for the sake of the noise and the argument. Let's be realistic and calm down rather than just jump into the wave so that let's talk about human rights. We all respect it, but we need to be a bit, modest about it.
Back in Qatar, modesty isn't the first word that springs to mind. Wealth is omnipresent. But as for social freedoms in the emirate, they're much less of a priority. Qatar is an absolute monarchy. There's no freedom of speech or free media. And also, no free elections. Like adultery, homosexuality is a crime. Qatari law requires women to have a male guardian who makes key decisions about their lives. The royal household retains supreme power here.
So you can just see for yourself, this is Qatar. Look, this is where the migrant workers are drying their clothes. Just see for yourself.
This footage was sent to us by Edwin, a Kenyan migrant worker in Doha. We've changed his name and his words are spoken by an actor. After all, expressing critical views can be dangerous. We can't verify his claims, but they chime with other accounts.
7 people in this small room. You have your personal belongings, your cooking utensils, your clothes, everything you have in this room. You will see cockroaches at night walking around and your food is there. It's not healthy.
Edwin has been working as a guard in a residential complex in the Qatari capital Doha for 3 years. His main duty? To check who's going in and out. A shift lasts 12 hours, plus a daily commute of around 3 hours to his accommodation on the city's outskirts. We keep in touch with Edwin for months. He sends us numerous videos from Qatar, reporting on the daily routines of his job, which is poorly paid. In audio messages, Edwin tells us how his boss blackmailed him when he wanted to change jobs. Edwin had to pay him the equivalent of more than 1,000 euros to get his passport back.
When you go inside the director's office, he tells you you have to leave your phone in the secretary's area because they know you might put your mobile phone on recording mode. If something happens, you don't have proof. Then he tells you you have to pay, which is illegal.
Because unions and strikes are banned in Qatar, there's no effective support for migrant workers. Complaint handling authorities only exist on paper. But in Edwin's homeland Kenya, there's someone offering assistance.
you are allowed, or you are supposed to have your passport with you, your phone, and they're not supposed to take it away from you. You know, that is wrong.
Kenyan national Malcolm Bidali worked as a guard himself for 3 years in Qatar. Because he complained about the poor living and working conditions on social media, he was arrested and detained for a month in Doha jail. Today, he's fighting for improved migrant workers' rights. From Nairobi, where he and a colleague founded the organization Migrant Defenders.
Humans have been migrating ever since the dawn of time. So I'm not dissuading anyone from traveling. What we are trying to do is to kind of put in place like ethical migration. We would use campaigns and advocacy, you know, inform the public, inform stakeholders, inform, you know, all these things. Keep it out there, you know, just information, information, information. You know, we can't just like sit like with the hands behind our back and all that. If we do nothing, the situation remains the same.
Back in Bangladesh, on the anniversary of Sujan's death, the men of the family go to the cemetery to remember the young man.
If my brother was still alive, we'd watch the World Cup together on TV. We'd cheer the matches together. But now I'm calling on the government in Qatar to pay foreign workers what they're entitled to and help those families who've lost a loved one in Qatar so that they can carry on living.
Human rights organizations and many national soccer associations are now calling on FIFA and Qatar to set up a compensation fund for Qatar's guest workers. But the world's soccer governing body has yet to fully commit to the idea. Which begs the question, when the final whistle calls time on the final match in Qatar, what will the world remember about these championships? The Soccer World Cup wants to succeed, whatever the costs.